My name is Joe Wrights, and this is Krewe Chats, and we're glad to have you with us. A couple housekeeping items before we get started, though. First, we're using the hashtag Krewe Chats, which you see right here on the lower third, and feel free to use that to reach us on Twitter and just talk, comments, questions, anything like that if you're watching live. And also our Twitter handles are there if you want to follow us as well. In addition to that, if for some reason you can't watch this whole episode live and you'd like to come back later, the link will be posted in the Marketo Community, as well as probably Twitter, I imagine. But with those few items aside, why don't we do a quick little round of introductions. Joe Wrights, I work with Fathom as a strategist, and my favorite word is serendipitously. Lord Dory.
Oh, sorry. It's hard to tell that you've selected me. So I am Dory. I am marketing automation operations. Marketing operations and automation manager. Sorry, totally had a brain fart there at eMarketer. And my favorite word is cacophony.
Ooh.
Jen, it's you.
Oh, is it? Cool. All right. Hey, guys. I'm Jen. I'm the Director of Marketing for a global software company, and my favorite word is Schadenfreude.
Jeff?
Jeff Krajewski. I'm Marketing Automation Specialist at PR Newswire, recently acquired by Cision. And I'm going simple. My favorite word is fishing.
Hey, sorry, did you guys lose me?
I think so.
Okay, where did I leave off?
Julie? Julie, your audio is not working here.
Is that working?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Any better?
Yep.
That works.
There we go, right. Sorry. I'm Julie. I'm currently based in the UK. I'm Assistant Professor of Digital Marketing for St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, in the next 3 weeks. My favourite word, which everyone's been dying to hear, is the word Kutsch, which means cuddle in German.
Okay.
My name is Enrico DeLeon. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, as a Senior Manager of Global Strategic Marketing at a pharmaceutical research company. And the word that I've always liked since I was little was plashy.
What does it mean?
I have no idea.
All right, and because I had a little bit of technical difficulty, who hasn't gone yet?
I haven't gone yet.
All right. You're on,
Me?
Sid.
Am I the only one? Okay, hi. My name's Sydney. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a marketing operations analyst at Phreesia. We're a small healthcare IT company, and my favorite word is Friday.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, did you go?
I did.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Yep.
Lord Dory?
I went.
All right. Apologies for the technical issues, but we're up and going now. And what we're going to discuss today, what we've been teasing, is really just all about data management, everything you need to know to really build out a robust system in your instance of Marketo. So obviously it's an endless challenge, and it's extremely rare to find a data management program that is perfectly optimized with no room for improvement. Having seen tons of different instances in the last month or so since joining an agency, I can say there's always data management things that can be improved. So we're going to talk about a few gotchas, a few best practices that may not seem obvious if you're new to Marketo, or even if you've been around for a while. But with that in mind, this Krewe Chat is just going to discuss some of the experiences this panel has had and provide some best practices that you might want to bring into your instance today. So to get started, talking point number one is kind of like, as we talk about data management, can someone on the panel just kind of level set what that really means to us in the Marketo vernacular?
I'll start it off, I guess. In Marketo data management, you want to make sure, number one, that your data is as clean as possible. Number two, that you're capturing the data and the correct data points. You also want to make sure that if you are syncing back to a CRM system that you are mapping correctly and that all of the data is correctly reflected in both systems, because most of the time your CRM is the gold source.
Cool. Anyone else have anything to add on that? Crickets. Cool. All right. So since we kind of have this diverse representation of companies and roles on the line, what are the components of data management that are most important for your instance? For example, like bounce management, when you delete leads, that kind of thing.
I'll jump in. So we have multiple newsletters, and so basically their subscription preferences are super important, and so we always need to make sure that in order to be CAN-SPAN compliant, CASTLE compliant, we have opt-in dates, we have IP addresses from which someone is opted in, and for each individual newsletter that we have, so we have opt-in dates, opt-out dates, basically tons of information that constantly needs to be updated, synced across our systems. And then additionally, since we are sending out so many emails, we send out probably about 1.5 million emails a week. We need to make sure that from a send reputation perspective, we're monitoring all of our bounces and really keeping track of what's going on in those systems. Since we have a dedicated IP, we don't want to basically cannibalize ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot by not watching those sorts of things. So we have a lot of data management campaigns for bounces as well as subscription preferences.
Sure. So tell me a little more about your bounce management. How do you go about tracking those?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different campaigns set up, some for soft bounces, some for hard bounces. We've found that obviously, so Marketo will mark people as email invalid only on one of 3 different types of hard bounces that occur. That's kind of something that some people aren't familiar with. There's a document kind of floating around in space somewhere, I'm not sure where it is since the whole community changeover, but there are 3 different types of hard bounces, and only one of them is going to be marked as email invalid by Marketo. So there are other hard bounces that you should be keeping track of, and so we allow a small amount of hard bounces or a generous amount of soft bounces is kind of what I would say, and then we suspend someone for a week. We unsuspend them, and then if they hit the bounces again, then we marketing suspend them for a week, and then we let them go through that 3 times basically, which is very generous, but we want to, it's kind of been requested by some of our teams internally, and then after that we remove their email preferences because we say, look, this is just not working.
Yeah. So if that's go ahead.
After you let someone bounce that many times, what do you do with them? Do you keep them in Marketo or do you kick them back to your CRM?
We keep everybody in both systems just based on an internal agreement that we have basically. So we do keep their information, but we remove all of their email preferences and put the reason of email due to excessive bounces. And so this way we have a record of the fact that they had excessive bounces. We actually don't clear out their email address because it might help somewhere down the road, whether it's for adjusting from a naming convention or something else. But we do we do mark them and remove their email preferences.
Another thing to note too is that there are companies out there that will systematically block emails from if you have a shared IP and it's known to be Marketo or other email vendor email system providers. I've experienced this in past lives with other companies where they just systematically blocked every email coming from my last employer. So you got to watch that also. A recent post in the community spoke to this where you want to double check and make sure that people at a particular domain, is there a domain-wide bounce or pre-checkers as well, because you may get false reports where you're also getting data that's reporting back that there all the links being clicked in emails from everyone at a particular company, which is also known to be spam checkers and other systematic items.
Have you guys seen in the Marketo community? There's an article, and apparently this show is going to be about how I butcher everybody's names. But there's an article that Edward Masson wrote, kind of about the different bounce categories and how to make sense of them. Does anybody use the bounce categories in Marketo, like Cat 1, 2, 3, 4?
Some, but we also use like the 550 or the 400s, the 500s. We're utilizing those as well.
Yeah, well, and that's actually a great point, because I just came across a client the other day that they had a random smattering of, in a series of emails, a bunch of those 550 errors, and it was like, okay, do we need to pause these guys, suspend them? What does this mean? And it was a great opportunity to have a bigger conversation around, hey, we need to talk about data management in general.
550s aren't always permanent, though, which is really frustrating. A 550.1 is not always like the end of the world. And I feel like I'm speaking gibberish right now.
No, you're just giving over to the nerd side.
I know.
Good thing we're all.
Sometimes, I mean, one of the other reasons is just if their inbox is full, for example, or the email is over a certain size. There's a lot of reasons that you could get bounces. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. What about deleting leads? Like, when do you guys deem it the right time to delete one, or like, how do you go about doing it?
We actually have a custom sync set up with Salesforce, so we have a box that if it is checked to true, then we can hold someone in Salesforce, but they won't come back over to Marketo, which is nice if you are struggling getting buy-in for a larger database size in Marketo, like I am. So we've had Salesforce for years and years and years, but I'm with a new company. I'm new to the company. The company's not new, and they've only had Marketo for about 1 year. So we're slowly convincing them of some things that we need to get added to our Marketo contract. But we utilized that block from Marketo custom sync that we had support set up. And if anyone has bounced or has unsubscribed or anything basically that indicates that we can't market to them and they haven't had any Salesforce activity in the last 6 months, then I go through every other quarter and move them back over just to Salesforce and don't hold them in Marketo anymore. There's definitely kind of gotchas with it. We have to be really careful when we do list uploads, because sometimes we'll upload a list of someone that exists already in Salesforce but doesn't exist in Marketo. So when we upload them, Marketo can't dedupe based on what we have in Salesforce. So it creates a duplicate in Salesforce. So like I said, there are plenty of gotchas with it that you need to watch out for, but that's how we delete leads. But we keep them all in Salesforce. Salesforce is the Bible. We live and die by it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant idea. I've seen it done a number of times, and in past lives, that's actually what we did as well, is creating that field, that just a checkbox in Salesforce, and then it makes it so your database doesn't bloat. And exactly right. Like when you come up to a renewal, to keep out the stuff that shouldn't sync back over out is key. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to chime in here, Joe. One other thing that you want to make sure is when you are doing mass deletions of anyone out of Marketo, even though they might be in your CRM, a lot of times there's custom fields still left in your Marketo database and the field mapping there, or the field management. So you want to make sure that you're going to take a full backup of all record information. And so we actually do that, and we store it in a shared location for our company as well, so that if we ever did have to go back and audit or provide, go into CanSpam or Castle or any of that information, we do have that as a backup.
Cool. Rico, Jen, Julie, anything else to add on lead deletion?
At least for us, I do. If they've hard bounced 3 times, I'll usually just delete them out of the Marketo database. And then something else that I did when we came up for renewal is, I'm not sure why, but people like to put crazy things in for like people's first and last names. So that's something to keep track of. If you're not already, just make sure your salespeople aren't putting in like Joe, last name died, don't contact anymore, or something like that, because that has happened. And then you email them.
That was dark and oddly specific.
It happened. It's a very specific, definitely a story. So, I go through and I look for those things, question marks. If they don't have an email address, I have a batch campaign running to remove them after 3 hard bounces. And that's kept it pretty clean for me and our purposes. So.
Now, I don't want to dive down a rabbit trail with scoring yet. We could probably make a whole chat about that. But just in terms of like what you guys do with alerts, like when do you alert your sales team, or do you alert anyone other than your sales team for MQL thresholds being reached, or I don't know what else? I mean, what else do you send alerts for?
We send alerts for our MQL threshold. We actually do it as a task in Salesforce, not an email, just because that's how our sales team likes to work. So we do it if the MQL threshold is reached, or if they fill out a fast track MQL form, like a demo form or a contact request.
Yeah.
We have a slightly different option. We have a business development team. They're actually based in Tel Aviv. So we have in Salesforce we have a pre-qualified queue and we have a qualified queue. So if they're anything up to an MQL, when they hit that threshold, the business development person responsible and the country team, because we deal with 6 countries, they get an alert, and the salesperson would get an alert as well, who we think might be the rep. Once it's been qualified, they come out the pre-qualified queue and then get assigned to the sales guy. But they have that kind of business development step in the middle, which can get a bit complicated at times because we have to make sure the right country goes to the right rep. But that helps. And sales alerts in general, we only ever send sales alerts if it's an internal event that we're hosting, because the reps end up with hundreds of alerts otherwise.
Yeah.
So if it's an internal event we're hosting and they want to see who's registered for like either a big money event or an internal event where we have our CEO attending.
Yeah.
Other than that, the sales guys just go, we don't want to see it, just tell us when they're a qualified lead and there's an opportunity opened.
Do you find that they typically believe you when you say it's an MQL?
We only introduced MQLs for Europe in January this year, so they're actually starting to like the idea of these MQLs that are coming through, and I mean we've generated about 3,500 since January, and they are starting to realise that these are much more qualified. Before they all worked on responses, so anyone who did anything, so downloaded the white paper or went to an event, or they were originally calling those people. Now they like the fact that they're much more qualified from a kind of inbound standpoint.
One of the other big things to note is that you want to establish SLAs or service level agreements with your sales teams, because if you don't have them in place and agreement from both marketing and sales, it's not going to work.
That's exactly what I was going to hone in on, Jeff. Does anybody actually use an SLA stage in their RCM?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. We've actually got 2 stages. One, and it corresponds to scoring thresholds. Again, we do have certain accelerator forms that will bring you up to that threshold, at least the minimum one, which is a qualified lead warm. We also have a qualified lead hot. So if you're warm, we have inside sales type team, we call them lead qualification team, where they actually have 4 hours to follow up on a warm lead, and 2 hours if it's hot, that they have to actually reach out, make phone contact. So they're actively calling and reaching out to these prospects.
Yeah. So in case we lost any viewers do you have an SLA in your RCM and you're just not quite that nerdy in your personal life yet? RCM, revenue cycle model, and SLA, service license agreement. But yeah, just the idea that you can have a timeline for your sales folks to respond and do something with an MQL, because it happens a lot that, like Jeff was saying, that we would encounter. Sure, we can create a boatload of MQLs, but all of them stay MQLs. We need to have some kind of window of expectations that we can get sales alignment to say I have this long to get to talk to the lead that it's an SQL, or move it to actively working, or whatever the next stage is. But yeah, if you're not that nerdy, you might want to put a ring on the significant other's figure, because we're going to really ruin your game if you stay with Krewe Chats long enough.
We're actually just about to establish SLAs for our MQL stage. We don't have one right now, but we've run into major problems. Not just with MQLs being camped out for a long time and not worked, but people thinking that they're moving them out of MQL and they're not. So they just stay in MQL forever, and we didn't realize it.
The other thing is start small. just if you need, take a select group of your sales folks and work with them. My previous life, we had 1 or 2 salespeople that were really savvy in Salesforce and even wanted to get integrated into Marketo, that we didn't provide access because we own the system and we were going to rule it. But you want to make sure that if you have someone that's eager, and you have a pilot program or something you've been thinking about, test small, fail fast, and then move on.
Speaking of moving on, great segue.
Excellent. Yeah, so let's talk about unsubscribe. Someone just briefly describe Marketo's durable unsubscribe feature. Crickets.
Jen, do it.
Okay. All right, I'm in. So durable unsubscribe basically means that you can't screw it up. I know in the past, in my youth, I would make the mistake of exporting and importing lists and, not necessarily importing the unsubscribe is true field and that type of thing. And then, oops, they start getting emails again and you get the occasional angry message. So what happens in Marketo now is if, for whatever reason, these people get deleted out of your database, when they come in, they might not have the other information that they had before, but at least they'll still be suppressed from your messages, and so you're still in compliance.
So why would it be a bad idea, because I've had people ask this, to just, oh yeah, there's an unsubscribe field, I'm just going to uncheck that box?
Because it's illegal. You will go to jail.
Yeah. Or have to deal with lawyers.
Go directly to jail. Do not pass go.
That's how it works. The police come to your office.
Don't forget the $10 million fine per email in Canada as well.
Yeah. Castle, we love you.
Yeah, Canada.
And Germany and Denmark as well.
You guys would be surprised how often I've heard that, though.
Really?
Yeah.
They say there's no stupid questions, but that's a stupid question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just an education thing, right? Like, I mean, yeah. But what about subscription centers, though? So, like, that's the same idea of, like, putting that control back in the user's hands of, let them choose what they want to subscribe to or not. What do you guys think about subscription centers? Needed, not needed?
Depends on how complex your business is. My last employer, we had 4 different divisions with multiple brands under each division. Some of them even competed with each other directly. So it is at times a data nightmare. Depending on how the leads are getting loaded, whether it's through Marketo or through Salesforce, making sure that particular mappings for all 3 brands under this particular division, if the salesperson is from that division, and they were entering through Salesforce, you gotta do it intuitively. You gotta make sure you've got the right fields in place for that management. One other thing that I would recommend, and I've seen implemented as well and talked about in the community, is that there are best practices where you actually have the date and timestamps where you're recording when someone actually opted in, or also the reasons why.
Yep. We also, one thing that we find to be important is that in Salesforce, any of our users are able to uncheck someone, so they're able to remove them from a list, but they are not able to add them to a list. So we don't allow that to occur, and you also need, I want to say you need admin privileges, or I don't know exactly what the rules are, but you can't modify someone's email address if they have subscription preferences associated with it, just due to like the really extreme side of Castle.
Enrico, any strong thoughts on subscription centers?
Actually, I haven't worked with any before, so.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, yeah, I think they're essential. But like, for me as an end user, I struggle with it just because, like, yeah, we want to give them options and make sure we're compliant and all that. But like, if I'm going to unsubscribe, if I'm going to click the unsubscribe link, the last thing I want to do from a user perspective is actually go through and select. Because what I'm going to do 9 times out of 10 is just select all the options for unsubscribing from all future emails, and then I'm out.
We actually had a subscription center at my last company, but I ended up scrapping it like not long before I left the company because no one used it. And to be honest, we didn't really use the segmentations it was giving us where people could subscribe to different types of things. We were segmenting things our own way anyway. So we just let someone unsubscribe or not.
Yeah, I think our deal too is we didn't have enough different things to unsubscribe from. Like we had a content stream, or several content streams, and a quarterly newsletter. So like, whereas like someone like Dory, who has like a daily newsletter about like literally everything in the world.
Not everything. We don't have that many lists.
You have all the things.
Right.
All the things.
So we got 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure we touch on this a little bit. Is the idea around blacklists and seed lists? Do you guys actually? Well, do you have any blacklists that you actively manage, or what goes into one?
I do, but it's not like super major. It's mostly like if for whatever reason we get a hold of a competitor email address, like that'll go on blacklist. But it's not, super huge just because we haven't had a need for it.
Anyone else? Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of use case in the past around like, once you set it up once, just to catch basic competitors and internal emails and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's not something that really takes a lot of management moving forward.
One thing that I read the other day actually that was kind of useful and might persuade me in the future to utilize blacklists more is that if you have an operational email, unsubscribes are ignored, but if you have someone on a blacklist, even if it's an operational email, they won't receive it. So basically, if you're blacklisted, Marketo will never send to you, whereas operational emails can still go to people who are unsubscribed. So that could be a useful feature.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah. So to kind of recap over the last couple minutes here, we talked through just basically what data management is, and then we talked about a few ways we handle bounce management. I'm actually going to put Edward Mason. Sorry, Ed. I'm going to put his blog post in the YouTube description, as well as whichever one of you posts this in the Champ blog. We'll put it there. We talked about lead deletion. We touched on scoring a little bit. We kind of glazed over it. One thing with obviously make it tokenized. I think we can all nod our heads at that one. But we'll talk more about that in the future, just around best practices and tips. We mentioned alerts and when to send them, what to include on them. One thing that I don't think we touched on, that just regarding alerts, that I am a huge fan of, working with a lot of different sales organizations, that's just the one biggest type of role that changes a lot. Not to say like companies have a ton of turnover, but there's usually a lot of shuffling of where people are. That's certainly been my experience on the brand side, and I've seen it a bit on the agency side as well. So one thing I like to recommend is tokenizing who receives basically whatever your alerts are. So like if you've got one for Asia Pac, or Europe, EMEA, or the US, whoever your sales leaders are that would be getting these alerts, or whatever role, that you tokenize it so you can go to one spot, change the recipient or recipients, and then just manage it from one spot. Before I move on, did anyone else have anything about alerts they wanted to tag onto that? Because I forgot to bring it up. Cool. Yeah, so we talked about alerts. We talked. I don't think we actually mentioned interesting moments, but that's an important aspect of any data management campaign. Does anybody actually use triggered interesting moments?
A few.
Can you briefly describe what a triggered interesting moment is?
Sorry, I don't know who the other person was. I don't want to like monopolize.
No, you go for it.
You go, girl.
So we'll use it actually on like a web page so that it's easier to really quickly identify to our sales team on what page someone submitted an inquiry sometimes, because we have a lot of different submission pages at times, and we don't want to have to create unique campaigns for all of those.
Yeah.
So
like your interesting moment would read like lead viewed my dot whatever the LP name is, whatever.
We do it for clicking a link in an email too. That shows what link they clicked and what email it was.
Yep, I've seen it done for that. I've seen it done for what smart campaign fired, which generally most salespeople don't care unless it's really easily, like clearly named, like an RSVP for an event, for example. They might care about that. But yeah, it's always down to the human element, right? Yep. We did talk about blacklists and seed lists a bit, but I think the only other major thing we didn't hit on was deduping. Does anybody have any killer deduping tips before we sign off?
I have a great deduping tip. When you merge leads, whether they're in Salesforce or in Marketo, if you use lead scoring, the out-of-the-box lead score field is summed, so they're added together. But if you have any additional custom lead scoring fields, like a behavior score or a demographic score field, for example, those are not added together. So beware. Do not intentionally create duplicates ever, because it will cause you many headaches. You sound
like this might have happened.
This might be recent experience, Sydney.
Like perhaps in the last 24 hours.
I'm a little scarred. Deeply scarred.
Very cool. Well, we're actually 2 minutes over at this point, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I've been Joe Reitz. This has been Krewe Chats. If everyone wants to go around while I click on you to sign off. This is Dory Viscogli, OC.
It's hard to tell who you're clicking on. I'm Dory. It's been fun. Thanks. See you guys.
Who's next?
Deuces, Enrico.
Bye.
You guys can't see what I'm clicking on, can you?
No. That plan went in the toilet.
So this Jeff.
Jeff out.
Jen.
Bye, guys.
Jules.
Bye.
And our special guest, Sydney Mulligan, a.k.a. Smulligan.
Thanks for joining us, Sydney.
Thanks,
Looking forward to seeing you guys again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We will announce very shortly what our next topic will be, so keep an eye out for that. Once again, this has been Krewe Chats, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.